I was rushed into hospital, and it was at that point that I left all the agony that I was in. I left the drama of the hospital. That's when I entered into a whole new realm, which was to be my near-death experience. I've got no fear of death now. I believe that the soul is too strong an entity just to continue living. Yes, the body stops and decays and switches off, but the soul continues on to that next realm. Before my NDE, I'd been living in London. I'd moved down there hoping to try and turn my life around because I wasn't in a great place. I'd left school with very little qualifications, so I was struggling to find work really. And so I thought if I moved to London, I might find some opportunities. But of course, it didn't answer all my dreams. It was even more of a struggle when I moved there because it was a very competitive city to live in. But I was picking up work doing mainly sort of manual labouring work on construction sites, washing up pots and dishes, whatever I could get my hands on. And that's how I was living day to day. Eventually I was broke. I was running out of work because I wasn't actually very good at that kind of stuff, especially the construction work. I wasn't cut out for it. So I started running out of money. I started drinking quite heavily as well because that's the kind of environment I was working in. And so that didn't help me with my finances, and so I was about to be evicted from my apartment, so things couldn't have got much worse really. I'd gone up to stay with my sister and her family for a couple of weeks just because things had got so bad, and I was seeing a friend off at the rail station who'd come up from London. As I helped her onto the car with her bags and everything, I stepped back after giving her a hug to say goodbye, and my coat got trapped in the automatic closing doors of the train car, and I just couldn't pull it free. I tried calling out for a guard, and there was no guard on that actual route. I was banging on the windows, I found these buttons on the doors to open the doors, but they didn't work because everything was locked down. So the train started to rev up its engines, and I just looked into the eyes of my friend who I was seeing off, and I just saw the absolute terror in her eyes, and I thought, oh no, this is it, I'm gonna die. So I was really just staring death in the face for the first time in my life. It was terrifying. The train started to edge its way out of the station. Then it started to change gear one after another, and it started to go really fast, and I lost my footing. I got dragged along the platform edge and then pulled between the platform and the speeding train, and I went under the wheels. It was a very violent and terrifying experience, as I'm sure you can imagine. It was just like being thrown into this huge mechanical beast, and it was dark, it was oily, it was fast and furious and frightening. I just tried to hang in there, I was determined not to let this thing beat me or take me. I had this strong willpower that I wanted to live, and I did, and there I was. I just kept my face right down into the gravel. I was rushed into hospital, and it was at that point that I left all the agony that I was in. I left the drama of the hospital. That's when I entered into a whole new realm, which was to be my near-death experience. It felt like a transition, and I actually figured, to be honest with you, straight away that I was dead. And I didn't fight it, I didn't try to resist it, It's not like I wanted to die, but after all the way my life had been and the whole horror of the accident, I just kind of went with it because I felt safe instantly as well. I was greeted by these pulsating colours all around me. They were like pulsating colours of light, like ambers, greens, yellows and reds, and that calmed me down. So I kind of lifted myself off the hospital trolley to look around to try and see where I was, and I realised I was no longer on that hospital trolley. And I looked down and I got my hands, and I was laid out on this huge rock now. It was like a huge granite rock. And the way I describe it best is like a medieval altar. It felt very comfortable to be laid out on. And despite the fact that I realised I was no longer clothed, I was just covered in this blue sheet. It was like a satin, sort of silky. And that also made me feel comfortable. And I just kind of closed my eyes and relaxed. Then I saw very bright light starting to come through my eyelids. So I opened my eyes, and as I did, I looked up, and there were these 3 symmetrical grids of white light slowly closing in towards me. This light was so intense that normally, the human eye would not be able to take that kind of light, but in this realm I could. So I kept looking into this light because I knew that it was more than just light. It was like a healing energy, a healing force that was just covering the whole of my body. I lay back and closed my eyes and just bathed in this energy of healing light. Then I felt the presence of somebody close to me, and so I lifted my head and opened my eyes again, and just at my feet was this person, this androgynous being that was emanating light from within, and with this pure white blonde hair and a simple black contemporary t-shirt, nothing too ethereal that you might expect to see. And I said, hang on, I know you. I know your face, but I couldn't figure where from. And I was saying out loud, where do I know you from? I know you. And this person just smiled at me with a knowing smile. But I trusted it, and I felt that this person was actually here to guard me and guide me as to where I might be going next. So I laid back in complete faith in this person. A little later on, I felt the presence of more people, and either side of me were 2 female forms. The girl on my right was wearing a very simple brown dress with long brown hair, whereas the girl to my left was wearing like a very traditional sort of beautiful white outfit, because she was of more sort of American Indian, Brazilian or Asian Indian in appearance, and so it was more of a traditional dress, which was really beautiful. Their hands were slowly hovering over my body, and they were going over the contours of my body without actually touching it. The energy that was coming from their hands was really powerful. It was just causing like every sort of molecule of my body to start vibrating, basically with unconditional love. And I felt that they were not only healing the injuries that my body had just been through and the whole shock of the actual accident, I felt like they were healing all the years of hurt that we all carry with us, the baggage as we call it. And I felt they were taking all those layers of baggage off me, and they were just getting down to the pure essence of my soul. And it was a liberating feeling. It was like something I'd never experienced in my whole life, and it felt great, so of course I felt total faith in all this. Then I started to think about my family, because they'd all been really distressed. My mother had been in tears, it was all very difficult for them. So I thought, if I'm dead now, they're going to be really distraught. So I was worried about them. So I just kind of led my way over and tried to look down over the side of this big rock I was laid on, hoping to see them, but I couldn't see them at all. But what I did see was just something that was just even more amazing, because it was like a huge waterfall of stars. It was like a big arc of stars, and it was like looking at something the size of Niagara Falls or Victoria Falls, but instead of billions of tons of water cascading over the edge, it was millions of stars that were just flying over, shooting stars and all, and it was just sparkling and really awe-inspiring. And I looked down and into this waterfall of stars, and as I looked, my eyes started to sort of focus, and I could see from one sort of galaxy into another. I was looking down into infinity. I started to see nebulous forming colours and beautiful formations, and I thought, wow, this is like, I'm not in a small darkened space that I thought I was initially. I'm actually in the universe itself, so I was very aware of being part of the universe, and that was really quite a powerful moment to feel that energy of being part of the universe. I felt a very much a connection with where I was now rather than being back on Earth. I just felt a connection of this new realm, of this whole heavenly state or whatever, that it was just more, I didn't know what it was. I didn't actually say, okay, I'm in the universe, but it just felt like the universe was surrounding me, because I was just surrounded by all these beautiful formations of stars and nebulas. But I was aware that I was feeling that energetic pull, that energy source was within me. At that point, I laid my head back, and the final part, I guess, of the whole experience of being out there was the most profound moment, because as I looked through the stars throughout the universe, I suddenly saw this tunnel of white light coming towards me. Well, I felt it before I even saw it. I felt this energy was almost like shaking my whole body, my whole being. And I thought, what's going on? And this beautiful tunnel of white light was coming closer and closer, and it was very vast. It had all these flames that were slowly circulating all the way around. Normally I would have been terrified by something like this, because I didn't know what it was, but I knew what I was staring at here. I was being told, in fact, was the source of all creation. This was God, not God in the usual form that I'd always seen in my school books, the guy with the long beard on the ceiling of the Vatican in Rome. No, this was God in the form of this beautiful white light. And the white light, again, was an energy of love, unconditional love. And I felt that it totally encompassed me. I describe it as being ultra real, because that's what it was. And it was at that point I was suddenly thrown back into my body. I was back in the hospital. All the energy of pain came rushing through. The light was suddenly gone from all that beautiful white light to the fluorescent strip. I was wheeled into theatre afterwards, and then for 8 hours under operation. And when I was in the hospital room, I was just thinking, oh my goodness, what has happened to me? Physically and mentally absorbing the fact that I've been under a train. That was a huge thing to deal with, But the biggest thing on my mind was this whole experience and how I was going to tell everybody about this, because I knew nothing about near-death experiences or anything then. I was scared. I thought, I'm going to have to paint this, and nothing like this in my life. But it was within me. It was way buried deep within inside me, and obviously it needed to come through. It was interesting because when I did start that very first painting, of course I was apprehensive, because I thought, how am I going to pull this off? Once I started painting, it's like I was getting a crash course in how to do this. I don't know where it was coming from, but I was being told how to sort of put colours to create skin tones and light and all those different things, and it started to come together so well for me that it was just amazing. And I knew that once I started doing this painting and the more that followed on, that I was still almost like attached to the energy of that other realm, and that I was being helped to bring this together. I work in music as well now, and I use both mediums to try to get across to people my story, and I definitely feel I'm being helped, that I'm being guided. I call it channeling. When it happens, I know I get those moments and I feel them, and it's a beautiful feeling, and it's almost like my mind stops thinking and I'm all together, and I stand back in amazement, and I'll go, wow, that looks great, that looks amazing, where did that come from? I always go, thank you so much, and so it's a process that I continue to be amazed by. I've got no fear of death now, and I believe that the soul is too strong an entity just to continue living. Yes, the body stops and decays and switches off and ceases to continue, but the soul continues on to that next realm. One lesson I did learn, when I was in that realm, was that time didn't exist. There was no sense of time, and I realised that for me personally, I'd spent the whole of my life up until that point focused on time too much. Like, I was thinking about the past, all the mistakes I'd made, missed opportunities, and I was thinking about the future, what was going to happen to me because I was broke, and where my life was going to go. And I never really stopped to live in the moment, and I realised that most of us don't actually live in the moment. The present moment is the most important part for us all, and I think that's something that's a good guidepost for me, and I think it's a good guidepost for us all. My website, which is called shineonthestory.com. You can go there and you can listen to my music, because I started writing music for orchestra, which was something I've got no training in. I still can't read or write music, but I've been writing for many orchestras now. The first piece that I wrote for orchestra is called The Divine Light, and that you can listen to that and stream it for free on the website on shineonthestory.com. And then you can find my social media links. And the only reason I say to go there is because that's the way you can catch up with what's happening, the next concerts coming along, or the next exhibitions, or, museum pieces or whatever that with my artwork.
I'm looking down at Peter Anthony, I began to feel as though something attached itself to my solar plexus, and I felt myself being vacuumed towards the spinning tunnel. And I'm sitting there seeing people from my past, my teachers, friends, my sister who passed away, all greeting me. And I say this because there was no, oh my God, what's that? You're not panicking, you're not freaking out, you're not asking questions. I think the most important part of what's taking place at that time is I'm allowing. So my abilities as a psychic began.
What made you ultimately choose to go back?
I could start crying right now, and I'm not going to, but sorry. Oh yeah, sorry. Compassion. So many people ask me who was Peter Anthony before the near-death experience, and for me, looking back at that old version of Peter, there was this quiet, introverted, barely spoke a word. If you got a nod out of me or a yes or no, everyone applauded because Peter Anthony spoke. I was born and raised Catholic in a very strict Italian religious background of Catholicism. And I think when I lost my family, my sister being my best friend, and many others, at that horrible period of my life, I was thinking, how could a just loving God just take away your family? And I became an orphan in my 20s. So that for me was my pull away from God. But back into who I was at the time of my near-death experience, I was with the CBS News Division. I rose to the top of the ranks of my industry, working with many politicians and certainly a lot of celebrities. And so I was in the height of my career when this took place. And so I said, for me, looking back, who was Peter Anthony? Well, Peter Anthony at that time was motivated by success, money, and I had a selfish goal. My day of the near-death experience, and I was celebrating my birthday party and with a wrap party. When I got to this private party, I began to feel nauseous. I began to feel this pain in my stomach, not knowing at the time that it was related to a misdiagnosis back of 6 months earlier. And the doctor at that time had diagnosed me as having a stomach ulcer and gave me Tagamet. And, I just... gosh, I wasn't playing my part, going to the doctor and doing appointments, because at that time I was extremely busy. And, if you know the old adage, the show goes on, well, I didn't have time to go to the doctor because the show went on. And anyway, back at that evening, I remember blowing out my birthday cake. And as I took my last breath on the candles, I doubled up in pain and excused myself and went to the bathroom. I went home. I thought I was okay. Got to my door and the pain came around, and I was bleeding on my suit from my lower area and my pants. And I passed out again, and one of my neighbors found me. David took me to he called the ambulance, and we went to the ER that night. And I remember in that ambulance, the faces on the paramedics. Here I am reaching for this my side, my abdomen, and the pain, as I said, was unbearable. And I could see their faces of obviously panic and asking me questions I didn't have the answers to. That's where the drama began. They didn't want to check me in. I had gotten out of my suit, for my friend David because I was bleeding. I got into some thrift clothes. I left my wallet behind. I didn't have any of my insurance documents. During the height of the AIDS epidemic in the late 80s, 90s, and they looked at me and were quite scared. And back during that period of time, unfortunately, we didn't know how AIDS was, how we got AIDS. We didn't know if it was airborne. We didn't know if it was blood. We didn't know nothing. I had lesions on my face. I was coughing. I didn't know at the time I had tuberculosis. I didn't know at the time that I had Crohn's disease. I didn't know that Crohn's disease basically, was exacerbated by food and or other things. And here I am bleeding, and here I am not being admitted. So David kind of went to bat for me and kind of threw a big old temper tantrum, and I got checked in through the admitting area. They had a young intern come and suited up. Oh my God, this guy was suited up like I was radioactive. And I remember the look of panic in his eyes was, to me at that time, was frightening. And I asked him, I reached up to him, and when I did, he panicked and pushed me into a corridor by the exit and left me there. And here I am, bleeding on a gurney. And I must say that it felt like an hour and a half. A nurse opens up the exit doors, comes in, sees me on the gurney. Her face of, I guess, bewilderment. What are you doing here? Anyway, this nurse saved my life, went beyond the call of duty, and took me down to the OR. I remember going into, or she actually, put my gurney into OR 11, and she pushed me into this little room. Here I am on my gurney suit, my suit, but my clothes bleeding, and I could hear when she closed the curtains that she was arguing with with some nurses and an anesthesiologist. I remember the anesthesiologist saying that, oh my God, and what have you done? You have exposed us to the AIDS virus. And she was arguing with him. What little bit I could gather, it looked like there was some kind of debate. I just remember I could feel spinning. I could feel this tug on my solar plexus. If you know anything about the movie industry, there's the thing called slow-mo. And as you are in this very edited, slow pause, if you will, I remember me, Peter Anthony, looking down at Peter Anthony from spirit form, looking down at Peter Anthony in physical form on the operating table, and watching the medical staff, doctors, the anesthesiologists go to medical protocol. It was like some kind of movie and some television series where everything's just happening at once. I could hear their thoughts. I could feel the panic. I could see the fear as I'm watching myself look down at Peter Anthony. This sense of peace, this sense of okay, this sense of allowing, this sense of surrender was a part of what's going on in my consciousness. And I want to say in my consciousness, because as I'm looking at physical form Peter Anthony and Peter Anthony's spirit form, of course, when we think spirit form, we need to understand this. There is no form, physical form of the person, meaning the spirit form looking down at Peter Anthony in physical form. There's just this sense of feeling, this sense of knowing, this sense of ethereal understanding. And as I'm looking down at Peter Anthony, I began to feel as though something attached itself to my solar plexus. And this is very important for many of us because it's as though this was some kind of vacuum that had attached itself, how was it attached itself to my solar plexus? And I felt myself being vacuumed towards the spinning tunnel. And I'm sitting there seeing people from my past, my teachers, friends, my sister who had passed away, all greeting me. And I say this because there was no, oh my God, what's that? You're not panicking, you're not freaking out, you're not asking questions. I think the most important part of what's taking place at that time is I'm allowing. The interesting thing about the people that you see, when you see them, you see these young people in the height of their careers, or the height of their youth, or you recognize them immediately as these people that were a part of your life, and not that older version of life, but the people that you recognize. I remember seeing my grandfather, and I was like so amazed at how, how young and energetic he was. And so you're seeing different parts of your world from your past, meaning your relatives and your friends, people that I didn't even know had passed. I saw a girlfriend of mine that I went to high school with that had passed. I didn't know, and there she was. Not only did I see these people from my past and they recognized me, and they made me feel at ease, but as I'm going through this tunnel, I'm seeing quantum physics downloading and digesting. I'm seeing mathematical codes to this day that I'm fascinated by. The numbers 333, 444, 999, 777, and a series of zeros, 000.00111.0. All these numbers floating in around me in this tunnel. And colors and sound that even to this day I can't even identify with, because it was something obviously from the other side. I think what I learned while I was going through this tunnel, that we are so manipulated by judgment. Our whole society is about, a Christian versus, Muslim, gay versus straight, rich versus poor. When you're on the other side and you're going through this tunnel, there is no judgment, there is no opinion, there is no better than, there's none of that. What I experienced on the other side is, when you are in this tunnel, all there is love, compassion, and kindness. That for me was a huge lesson. The opinions of others, if they don't resonate with my consciousness of today, it doesn't matter. What matters is my truth. What matters is my opinion and how I feel. And I'm one that I don't judge as much as I observe and come to my conclusions. So for me, the math, the colors, the sound, all this information that I'm sharing with you today, took me 7 years to digest, and probably 7 more years to kind of fully believe, because many didn't. I ended up in this tree, and I think for me, I didn't know at the time. I began to do lectures years ago. The facilitator said, "Oh my God, you ended up in the tree of life." So here I am in a tree of the tree of life, right? And next to me is this being, this advanced being. And again, when I say advanced being, I definitely know it was a male being. I definitely know that it was something far more intelligent than anything I'd have experienced. So I listened. I allowed this being's way of being to guide me to my life review. 0 to 60. Your entire life, from the moment that you're born and to the moment I died on my operating table at 11 p.m. in operating room 11 for 1.11 minutes, your whole life is just there. It's like a matrix. Every second of your life, every moment of your life, everything that you forgot about, everything that you thought that no one was watching you, you see it. You see the conversations you had. You see the moments where you weren't at your best. You see yourself, not being nice to the person that worked at a pharmacy who was, the cash register attendant. You see your rudeness. You see also your kindness. You see everything that you were doing or not doing, should have done, didn't do, could have done, all before you. And I go back around here, which is very important. No judgment. You don't look down at Peter Anthony going, "Wow, you were rude to that lady on the telephone when you were trying to dispute your credit card information. You were rude to the tech at the cable company." You don't judge yourself as much as you go, could have done better. That's what you're thinking to yourself. It's almost as though you have this love for yourself, that and understanding of self that I can't even begin to explain. Every step that you take from the time that you're born until where we are in this conversation today matters. It is a part of your destiny, if you will, that every step, when sometimes something doesn't go our way, I sometimes say to so many times in so many lectures, sometimes the rejection in life is protection. Before I came back, I ended up in this place called Bordeaux. Now, this is something that is very important because I have so many people who, when they hear this part of my story, they question, they doubt. Bordeaux is what Catholics would call limbo, purgatory. The Buddhists refer to it as Bardo, the in-between state. Imagine being in outer space, and you see every planet, every galaxy, every star, every moment. You're kind of suspended in galaxies upon galaxies, and here I am having this connection with, I call it God. You can call it whatever you want, allowing me to see our planet, us as a warring nation, and we think about that when you look down and you look at country after country, war after war, from World War I, the Civil War, World War II, Vietnam, you see all this, you identify the ego that has basically destroyed our planet. You see the decisions being made by those people in power that we continually vote for, who take our power away. And I think that was a big reality check for me, because I thought, we're allowing people, again, going back to the opinions of others, to create laws that basically went against our very nature, called being good on this planet. For what? For profit, for greed. So that was a big reality for me. And so I'm seeing the war that goes on. I'm seeing the destruction of our planet. I'm seeing our environment slowly but surely die by our own hand. I'm seeing, the animal kingdom being persecuted. You're not judging it and going, oh my God, we as a collective consciousness, as mankind, as humankind, we're not a nice consciousness. But I'm going to digress here, or actually, not digress, but take you to another set of consciousness. Not only was I seeing that, but I saw nurses and doctors, I saw paramedics, I saw school teachers, I saw housewives and husbands, making a difference on the planet. I saw those that we don't even know about in their neighborhoods, helping people out. From the simplest kind act of saying hello to complimenting other people when they've had a bad day. We don't realize that our one bit of kindness, our one little hello could be the very thing that changes someone's life. And so I saw lots of those moments, understanding that there is a balance of the not so good energy and the positive energy. And I think for me, the biggest awakening that I had, and I still talk about it to this day, that there is no Catholic, that there is no, evangelical consciousness, that there is no black or white versus gay versus straight. There is mankind. And I think for me that mankind is here as a way to help each other. And we kind of forget that. So as I said, I'm looking down at this place I call Bordeaux. It's not that I'm looking down again as a form of judgment, but as a form of awakening. Looking at the destruction, looking at the persecution of the animal kingdom, the wars fought in the name of religion. You're seeing all this, and I just remember the voice saying, "Do you want to go back?" I saw, the struggles I would have coming back. I saw the new gifts I would embark upon. I saw the relationships that would leave me because of them not believing in my near-death experience. I saw all of that. "Do you want to go back?" the voice said. And I said, yes.
What made you ultimately choose to go back?
I could start crying right now, and I'm not going to, but sorry. Okay, sorry. Compassion. Am I going to make a great difference on this planet? It's just me. I mean, there's one little person, but I did learn throughout my, stages of coming back that one person can make a difference. And I ask you, for those who are listening, is it you? Are you that person? When I did come back into my body, and I go back to that moment of that vacuum cleaner to my solar plexus, I remember the moment I hit my physical body. In other words, when soul reconnected with Peter Anthony in physical form, I remember that as though I was shoved against the wall. The impact, the force of me connecting with body, spirit to body, was, you just don't forget, or at least I don't. And I remember being able to smell the drugs in my system. I remember the pain in my abdomen. I could feel the lines of surgery inside and out. My senses, when I came back, even though I remained unconscious for almost 3.5 weeks to 4 weeks, I could smell. I remember I was heightened. My dear, lovely lady at the time in my life, when I was in intensive care, she would come and she would read to me. And I don't know what happened, but she began, she was a numerologist, and she was a psychic. She was into all this, what we refer to as witchy woo-woo, but she also was very religious. And so she combined both ways of teachings, reading to me while I was in intensive care. And I could look down and watch the doctors and nurses, in the hallway laughing and making fun of her. And I remember when my doctor, my own personal doctor, came in and he asked her what she was doing. And she said, well, I'm reading to him. And he goes, well, he can't hear you. And she said, yes, he can. I'll never forget that moment, because I did. Everything she read to me was a part of my new awakening. Everything she taught me in numerology and astrology. An example, I remember her saying to me, to this day, Aries is ruled by the number 1, and it's about me, myself, and I. In a previous lifetime, you chose to come back in this lifetime to lead. You were perhaps an extraordinary person, and in this lifetime, you're an ordinary person to come back to do extraordinary things. She just would read to me and say these things that would go down 1, number 2, and identify with each zodiacal sign. And I remember listening to this, and I remember when I regained consciousness, the first thing I asked her to do was to go get me numerology books. And she kind of looked at me like, wow, I had to know what I saw on the other side. I had to know what these numbers meant. And again, there was nothing there that identified those triple codes. There was nothing there that went into the quads of consciousness, these angel codes, nothing at that time. And so I think for me, that was my first aha. That was my drive, again, the beginning of my mission. The hardest thing for me, looking back at that moment, was the friends and what little bit of family I had, and those who knew me, didn't believe, didn't listen, who left me. What I learned is everything is carbon matter. Everything is connected. My action begets a reaction, begets something else that's negative or positive. If you understand that we are all given choices every day, so if you're in a bad relationship, you got to make some changes there. You got to own up to it. You got to have your own little power with self and say, I can't allow this to be a part of my consciousness. So for me, this whole change was a metamorphosis. My fascination with numbers and numerology and astrology and my psychic abilities took over the new Peter Anthony. It's as though, and many will relate to this and many won't, it's as though while I was on the other side, someone new stepped in and took over Peter Anthony's body. I can handshake someone and get a blueprint, a psychic read, if you will, on that person. I can hear their thoughts at times. And not by, as though the audio is tuning up and I hear, no, that's not me. You can learn a lot about a person by what they don't do. So my abilities as a psychic began. years and years of studying numerology and codes, what have you, trying to figure out what happened to me on the other side, began to unfold. My life changed by a phone call from a homicide detective. He was working on a case they couldn't resolve. He knew about my gifts as a numerologist. And so anyway, that kind of changed my life. The next thing you know, I get a phone call from a series at the time called Sightings, which is at that time one of the #1 reality shows when there were no reality shows. And here I am, working with forensic experts. And then I'm, the next thing I'm doing another show, and another show, and another show, and I'm traveling around as a psychic detective, working on cases that were, rather unusual. And, again, not trying to change your mind about who I am and what I do. But, I think proof's in the pudding when you look at these shows that I did and see what we uncovered. So, as I said, the more I worked on numerology as a tool to solve these cases, the more incredible the client list became. We were working on a case. I can't tell you the name of the celebrity that we were working with, but he was a non-believer. We were in a Catholic church downtown Los Angeles, and there she was, the nun in this Catholic church, ghost, if you will, talking to me, leading me to where this child had, fallen down the stairs in the basement. So, yes, I see spirits. I've worked on so many different cases that I see things, can explain things. There's one there. If all of you who doubt, if you want to go into my website and just scroll till you get to borderline, I worked on a case that goes back to World War II in an internment camp of the Japanese American citizens, and how they were basically, as citizens, were taken to this internment camp here in the United States in Death Valley. And you see me walking on the land. There's nothing there, and as I'm walking on this land, I'm telling the camera and what I see, what's going on, what happened basically in I believe it was in the early 40s, and if you want to say I time travel back to that period of time, I did. If you want to go onto my website, click on my video sections, you can see a whole list of my shows that I've worked on. What I learned through my many years of investigation, we fluctuate between logic and intuition, right brain versus left brain. I've learned to use both at the same time. We've all had those moments when we should have, could have, would have not done, should have done, did do. And I think the more and more that we listen to our intuition versus logic, when your intuition speaks to you, it's 100% accurate. It's our logic that persuades us that something didn't happen. What I began to do as a psychic detective, or working on different cases, and I still do this today, I allow the spirit, the ghost, the feeling to be a dominant part of my consciousness and let it lead me. And so we all have that ability. It's just I've just taken it to another level. And what I say to so many of my listening audience, you're not in physical form. You're consciously aware. And so the gift that you come back with is to be tuned into everyone's consciousness. As I said, when I go to a park and I listen to the birds, chirping their secret codes as they fly from tree to tree. When I watch the squirrels running from rock to rock looking for their secret little treasures. When I watch the duck swim upon a lake and it's, quacking with its little ducklings, I listen, because it's there in Mother Nature that I find God. I call those the cathedrals of consciousness. And so for me, when I'm tapping into that spheric ionic waves of consciousness, I'm tuned in to everything. And that's where we are making our biggest mistake, because we're all about, the phone call. We're all about the meeting. We're all about, meeting deadlines with the boss. We're all about, winning. And we forgot about how to use our intuition. And that, if you have to break down anything, is what I learned to do the most. Our gift on this planet is every moment that we're here. We're here to make a difference through kindness, through compassion, through love, through helping. We are lacking in hope. We look at our educational system, we look at Wall Street, we look at our politics, we look at our planet. We have lost hope. And if you give humankind, mankind, just a slither of hope, They'll run a mile with that, and that's my mission.
It flatlined. And the nurse, she got scared and went running out of the room. And before she left the room, she says that she's killed. And I'll never forget that, because it was the feeling that I felt when I was standing above my body. I felt her emotions because of what she did. There came a time when the person next to me said that it was time to go. We left and went to the most beautiful place you can imagine. To describe it would just not be, I couldn't do it justice because it was that beautiful. In a life for you would think you'd feel guilty, you'd feel like you were being stepped on or stabbed at or disciplined, or it was not like that at all. It was, for me, it was more of a learning experience. I had to learn how to treat people better. When you go through an experience like that, you have to process it. And that's why it took me probably over 40 years to come out and tell my story. Up until that time, it was all about money. I wanted to get ahead. My goal that I set with my two brothers was to be millionaires by the time we were 32 years old. And so when you do that, you basically commit to doing whatever it takes to become one. And when I had my experience, I realized that it wasn't all about money. It was basically about how you treated people. I was out of town, and I'd been spending a lot of time out of town, probably 3 to 4 weeks at a time, because again, it was about money. And so when I came home, we had a good Christmas, and I'd been gone for 3 or 4 weeks before that. And I was a pretty selfish person. You know, there again, it was all about money. And so when I came home, I decided to go skiing during that Christmas holiday. And so I called a friend of mine. We went skiing up to Park City, Utah. And it was a beautiful day. I've never seen snow like that. I love skiing mountains. Fresh powder, there's nothing like it. And so we had a great day. And about 11 o'clock in the morning, I was standing on the lift line. And there was a bunch of us standing on the lift line bragging about how we made our turns and how we made jumps and how we handled the moguls as we were coming down the mountain. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw a young lady. I saw her coming down with poles just going every which way. And she ran into us in the lift line. We helped her up and never really saw her for the rest of the day. And never thought anything about, the incident that happened. Well, I skied the rest of the day. And when we got down to the car, it was probably around 4 or 4:30, a friend of mine, and he was an EMT. That was his practice. And I started taking off my skis. I took my glove off. Took my left one off first, and then I took my right one off, and my thumb was hanging straight down. My fingers were going up, but my thumb was hanging down to around my wrist. And I realized that accident that day was no more than what I thought it was. Now, when your fingers are in the gloves, it's all intact. But you have to realize it was cold that day. Even though it was clear skies, beautiful, it was still cold. And so when I took the glove off and realized something was wrong, my EMT buddy said, "I can't fix that with a Band-Aid. Well, we made it down to the hospital, and my wife Connie, she had raised everything. It was it was really good. I mean, they were ready for me, and they took me in, they prepped me, and they started wheeling me down the hallway. It's something I saw vivid in my mind today. I didn't even tell my wife that I didn't tell her that I loved her. I didn't tell her that I loved my kid. And I went in and they had me laying on a table. I remember the anesthesiologist being called out on another emergency. And the doctor said, that's not a problem. I've done this bare block procedure before. And that's basically where you're doing a walk home. Well, what they did is they prepped me to put a sheet between me and my arm so I couldn't see him operating on me. And we put a tourniquet that's in there around your arm. And then they have two valves on. They close the two valves off, and then they bring the arm down, and they shoot a local, which is lidocaine, in your area where they're going to be operating. About 15 or 20 minutes into it, I started to feel a lot of pressure in my arm, and the doctor instructed her to release one of the valves, which is what you do. You release it, and then it gives you pressure release in your arm. Well, sometime later, the pressure started building up again. And what the nurse was supposed to do was close the first valve and then open the second valve. Well, unfortunately, she opened the second valve and did not close the first valve. And I felt the medicine go up my arm, across my chest, and into my heart. Now, the next thing I realized is I was being lifted out of my body, and I was standing up above, and I was watching the operation. Now, it was an odd feeling because I looked down at the table and wondered who that was first, and I recognized it was me laying there. Why was I laying there, not standing up here where I am? And it was a different kind of a feeling. But what I was mainly concerned about was the doctor was doing, how he was operating on me. I could vividly see all the tools that he was using on the table. They were all lined up. And then I looked over at the machine. It was a heart monitor machine. They had a flat line. There was no function involved. It was just flatlined. And the nurse, she got scared and went running out of the room. And before she left the room, she says that she's killed me. And I'll never forget that because it was the feeling that I felt when I was standing above my body. I felt her emotions because of what she did. Now, when she ran out, there were several other people that ran in, and then they came in and they tried to revive me. Now, what was unique was the doctor kept on working. He was really diligent what he was doing. And then I realized that there was somebody standing next to me. I don't know who that person was. I mean, I'll recognize the voice when I hear it again. But they were kind of standing beside me behind at an angle where I could not see him. What I noticed from this person is he was talking to me through my mind. Well, I kept glancing over to my body, wondering why that was. Didn't look like there was any life in it. It looked like it was just, well, it was dead. That's the best thing I could say. There came a time when the person next to me said that it was time to go. We left and went to the most beautiful place you can imagine. To describe it would just not be, I couldn't do it justice because it was that beautiful. I was standing in a field, and this field in front of me and to my right was grass. It was tall grass up to about my waist. And this grass was not the usual grass you see. It was long strands of grass. And it was green on the bottom, but had gold tips on the top. And one thing I noticed was the grass was all flowing towards me. Now there was no wind. So it was like each individual strand had its own soul and provided its own energy. It was very unique because I'd never experienced that before. To my left was wildflowers, and wildflowers were all different colors. But then again, the thing that I noticed was every flower was facing towards me. Every leaf on that plant was facing towards me. And there again, I felt that love and that energy that came from those flowers. And I'm talking flowers of all different colors. You know, we see 6 color wheel here, or I saw 10. And I saw colors I can't even describe. They were so beautiful. Now, just to the left of the flowers was tall trees. Up at the top of the tree were leaves, and the most brilliant colored leaves you can imagine. Then I looked around at my surroundings and noticed it was more of a panoramic type view. I mean, I could see a long ways to my left, I could see a long ways to my right. But the escort that I had was still standing beside me. Well, through my mind, he told me to not look back. Don't look back. And it was so clear that I was not allowed to look back. And I knew that I wasn't going back because of what he said. Now, in front of me, there were 3 different shapes of clouds. And it was like one big one in the middle and 2 smaller ones on the side. But on the outsides of the clouds was the most brilliant blue sky I'd ever seen. Now, again, there was no wind. You know, there was nothing blowing, but it was like everything was flowing. And like I mentioned before, the grass and the flowers were all flowing towards me. Well, after having a chance to see my surroundings, I noticed that the person beside me was gone. And when thinking about it over the last 40 years, when you think about being alone, you begin to have anxiety. You know, why am I alone now? Yeah, but I didn't feel that at all. It was like it was love coming to me. It was so peaceful that I didn't want to leave because it was something I'd never felt before. And then something happened that was something that I wasn't very proud of in a lot of ways. I had a review of my life. And I've heard this story from a lot of other people. They've had life reviews. And I totally understand what they went through. Because you don't just see it on a video screen. You don't just see it in your head. What you do is you live it. You live every emotion that happened from the day that you were born until I was 28 years old. I started off by seeing myself being on my mother's stomach. Now, being given life, you know, to come into this world. And I'll never forget seeing how I hurt people. You know, when you're going after money and you're going after status in life, you almost do everything you can to get ahead. I played professional basketball over in Europe, and You always wanted to be just a little bit better than that other person because if sometimes that's all you needed to get to the next level. And so I knew how to do that very well. And it transferred into my everyday life in the business world. But what I didn't realize is until I had this life review is how the other person felt when I did something maybe unethically to get better than him or her. In a life review, you would think you'd feel guilty. You'd feel like you were being stepped on or stabbed at or disciplined. It was not like that at all. For me, it was more of a learning experience. I had to learn how to treat people better. The thing I noticed was I didn't see any of my riches around me. I didn't see any of those motorhomes or boats or toys or all my cars. I didn't see any of that. The only thing I saw was how I treated people. And this has probably been one of the biggest learning experiences of my life, is to try to understand how people feel about what I'm saying to them and to listen, because every person's journey is totally different. After I reviewed my life, I went, okay, I did it. I didn't have anybody to argue with. There was no way to explain why I did what I did. I did it, and I accepted it. Well, after standing there for a few minutes and contemplating what had happened, I realized that everything that was done in that life review was done with love. And I realized that, I could have been chastised. Literally somebody could have walked up and smacked me or put me inside of a cage or whatever. That's what the actions that I was doing. But it wasn't done that way. It was almost like somebody was reaching out to me to teach me how I should have been living my life. And I accepted it. I accepted full accountability. Everything was done in black and white, right or wrong. And there was no fence in the middle. There was no gray matter at all. It was done as if this is the way you probably should have done it. Well, after that happened, I was standing there in the field and a voice came from out of the cloud and said, to start walking forward. And I started walking. One thing I noticed was there were rays that were coming out from behind the clouds. And those rays were coming towards me as if to pull me towards the cloud. But on the other hand, I noticed that the flowers and the grass were following me as if to push me towards the cloud. It was the most unusual feeling. It was energy that I had never felt before. I wasn't floating towards the cloud. I was walking towards it. But it was as if they were pushing me and the rays were pulling me, which I don't know if you've ever had somebody embrace you and you realize that the feeling that you get when somebody puts their arms around you, and it's an energy you don't normally feel. In our home where I was growing up, nobody ever told you, they love you. I come from a broken family, and a lot of the time I lived on the streets, so I never experienced that kind of love before in my life. But it felt good. It felt so good that I would have taken everything that it would have been given to me. It felt that good. Well, I walked up to that cloud, and an arm came through that cloud. Not a person, just an arm, and it was from the upper part of his arm all the way down. And I had an opportunity to study that arm because it was a strong arm. His upper forearm was strong. Now I'm 6'3", I weigh 270, and so I'm a pretty good sized person. But his arms were bigger than mine. And I remember looking at his hand, and his hand, the way he had it, was his fingers together, thumb extended. It was the most beautiful thing that I'd ever seen. It wasn't put his hand up. It was like he was just reaching for my hand. The other thing I noticed was I didn't see color in that hand or that arm, which really, in our where we live, we see black, we see white, we see brown, we see red, we see, and the color of people's hands and arms and face. But I did not see any color. It was the most beautiful, pure color that I could ever describe because it was that pure. I got within inches of taking that hand to go into that cloud, and I felt energy through those fingers that I had never felt before. I mean, I was this close to grabbing that hand, and I knew that if I grabbed that hand, I'd never be back. And the next thing I knew was the arm pulled back, and I tried to grab for it again, second time. And then a voice came through the clouds into my mind. It said, "It's not yet your time. You have more things yet to do." That was it. I went back into my body, and I was laying on the table. I had a sheet over my head. I had a paper on my chest that said that I'd been dead for 20 minutes. A death certificate had been filled out, and I flipped the sheet off of my head and about scared the doctor and the nurses half to death. As they were wheeling me out, we were going past the waiting room. My wife was out there sitting there, and of course she didn't know anything that was going on. And the doctor went running over to her and said, "He's okay. Everything went well. We brought him back." And my wife saw a whole different thing than what I saw. She saw fear. Had 3 kids. What am I going to do if my husband dies? I mean, she saw a whole different view of what I saw. I saw beautiful things. In fact, I did not want to come back. I know I was being sent back to learn. I had to learn something that I had not done previously. But being selfish, I wish I had stayed. It was that beautiful. For 3 days, I felt total peace. And all I hope for is in the next life is I can do something just a little bit better than what I reviewed the first time. Life is a learning pattern. I realized that when I had my experience that there is life after death. I had a near-death experience, but I know that there is life after this. When I was standing at that cloud, I felt people on the other side of that cloud. I could sense it. It was as if they were waiting for me to come through that cloud. And I don't know if they're going to beat me up, or if they were going to cheer me on, or what they were going to do, but I would hope that next time that I may be cheered on for what I did. I also realized too that if I am here now and there's an afterlife, that there is also a life before this one. And it was a different feeling, but I really believe we came from somewhere. We're here now to learn, and that we're going into another life, and it'll probably be just a continual learning pattern. Do I know that? No. Can I feel it? Yeah, I can feel it. But the interesting part is, I got the shock of my life at 28. As life goes on, we're humans, and we have a tendency to fall back into our old patterns. About 10 years after, I got struck by lightning. I went golfing with a friend of mine, and we both got hit by lightning. And you don't talk to usually too many people that have been hit by lightning. They're still alive. And what it did to me is it gave me a real shock. It blew out my friend's back. He said he saw smoke coming out of my head when I got hit by lightning. He ended up having multiple back surgeries, and I walked away from it. Now, I didn't walk away with the feeling that, ha ha ha, I got hit by lightning and I walked away from it. I walked away with, I got it. All right, I got it. Sometimes it takes a guy 2 or 3 times to figure out, that they made a mistake along the way, and now it's time to get back on track. I'm here. I'm 70 years old. I'm still learning. I know there'll be a day where maybe I won't make it through one of these experiences, but I hope that I have a better report when that happens. It's where you're at right now. You have the ability to make that change and move forward. I just hope that everyone that reads this book or sees the movie will realize that it doesn't matter where you are in life. You can change. Being kind to other people is magical. I love being able to just smile. And that's something as simple as a smile, might change somebody's day. I'm not perfect at it, but I'm learning. And when we decided to do this and come out about this, we started a foundation. And it's called the Gracie Scott Foundation. And I can't say all the proceeds because there are expenses, and writing books and doing movies, but we're putting a lot of proceeds into this foundation. And it's for children with special needs. We've realized since we started this foundation that it doesn't just affect the child, but it affects the whole family, and what the parents are going through. And so we're trying to help these families maybe have just a little light in their life. And I just wanted to share those with you because we've had more fun with the foundation then people knowing who I